for today, which is called moral relativism. If you don't, oops, sorry, if you don't mind if I can share my screen for you guys to see. So our topic today is moral relativism. Now you might be like, what the heck does the Bears have anything to do with that? Well, actually, it has a lot to do with what we were just talking about. Pope Benedict, when he was Pope, one of the things that he really argued about or argued against was this idea of moral relativism. He even went so far as to say that this is one of the greatest evils facing the church. So you all might be like, what the heck is moral relativism? Like, okay, well, let's take a look. So there are a couple of things that we have to talk about, and it all has to deal with truth. There are two types of truth that we have in the world. There's absolute truth, and there's what we call relative or objective truth. So let's take a look at what we're looking at here. Absolute truth is something that is not restricted in any way, or it applies to all. So that's what we consider as something that's absolute. It applies to everyone. Okay. Relative or objective is something that is existing or having its specific nature only by relation to something else, meaning it's dependent on something else, or put in another way, not absolute or independent. Okay, so, and then the last part of this is looking at the idea of truth. What is the definition of truth? A verified or indisputable fact, proposition, principle, or the like. An obvious or accepted fact. Now, the issue that we end up coming up with in all of this when we're talking about this is that there are some truths in society, in our world today. Moral relativism likes to say that there is no truth that applies to everyone. Truth is dependent on every person. Now, when you look at that, you're just like, okay, yeah, I get that. Like, people have obviously different religions and different beliefs. And so everyone has a right to believe what they want to believe. Okay. But does that mean that there isn't anything that's absolutely true for everyone? Well, let's do this. Let me share this link with you. So no more games. I'm not going to play any more games. No more lies. Okay, I know that the Bears are not in the Super Bowl. I wish that they were. I think even if they were, they probably would have gotten trounced. But still, nonetheless, until we get Deshaun Watson, we ain't got no hope. But still, if you could all please go to that link. Those of you who are driving, don't go to that link. But but I do thank you for joining, even though you are driving or on the road. But if you can access that link, please go ahead and access that link. It's going to take you to a polling site, and it's going to ask you some questions on whether or not, so don't answer just yet, is the thing that is brought up, is the topic that's brought up, is it an absolute truth, meaning it applies to everyone, or is it a relative truth? It depends on the person. So absolute truth, it applies to everyone, all human beings, all around the world. It's a basic fact of life. Or is it something that is dependent on the person? The person can choose. So go ahead, take a few moments to go through the survey. Then I'll share with you what you thought. Now, again, try not to be like, okay, well, like if I'm a Bears fan, I'm not going to be like, okay, the Bears are the greatest team in the world. Yes, I agree with you, but it's not the questions aren't asking you whether this is true or not true. The question is asking you whether it's an absolute truth or whether it is a relative truth. So is it absolute, it applies to everyone, or is it relative in that it applies to you if you choose to? It doesn't apply to everyone. You can choose whether or not it applies to you. So go ahead and work your way through. All right, most of you guys are working your way through. So I think most of you are moving along well. So let me go ahead and let's go through these questions. Okay, so the first question. The White Sox are the best. White Sox, of course, are a Chicago baseball team. They are the second baseball team in Chicago. There are two baseball teams in Chicago. One is the White Sox, one is the Chicago Cubs. And all of you said that this is a relative truth. You are right. This is a relative truth because it's dependent on people. They can choose. You don't have to choose the White Sox as your team. Like I'm sure if Melvin Etchen, if you ask Melvin Etchen, he probably is not a White Sox fan. Are you, Melvin Etchen?
Heck no.
Okay. Oh yeah, you have the Orioles. Okay, good. If you ask Justin Sheridan, Justin, are you a White Sox fan?
Yes, and they are going to a World Series sooner or later.
Okay, so Justin says that they are. They are the best. But just because Justin says it doesn't mean that we all have to say it. Okay, good. Thank you. Good. Let's move on. The next one, of course. Oopsie. Chicago is the greatest city in the world. Thank you to the few of you who thought that this was an absolute truth and that it applies to everybody. But unfortunately, no, this is a very relative truth in that it's dependent on the person. Even some people in Chicago would say, I don't know. I, of course, think that Chicago is the greatest city in the world. And many of you probably also think that Chicago is the greatest city.
Yeah, of course.
I try a lot. Oh, no, we're not going to do this. Don't bait me into that. But no, but still, it is a relative truth. It's a choice. You can choose whether or not this is true for you or not true for you. Let's go to the next one. Killing is wrong. Okay, thank you that all of you said that it's an absolute truth. And you're right. This is an absolute truth of humanity. Of even if you want to say like the church teaches this, humanity needs this, that killing is wrong. And that's something that not only applies to some people if they choose it, but it applies to all of us. Because that's how humanity survives. Okay? Let's move on to the next one. The best place to go for vacation is India. Now, those of you who have family in India, your Appachins are there, and you have family, and you get to go on houseboats and stuff, you're probably like, yeah. And you don't have to pay for anything because your parents are paying for everything. You're like, yeah, this is great. I'd love to go. Whereas maybe if you had like a horrible allergic reaction or the water gives you diarrhea or you just don't really like the hot and humid life, you're probably like, no, this isn't the greatest. This would be considered a relative truth. You have a choice. A lot of people have different choices with that. So you can choose that. This isn't something that is a make or break. It's not a moral issue as such. You are created male or female at birth. All of you said that this was an absolute truth, and this is an absolute truth. Now, this is somewhat of a touchy-feely subject, especially today, because it's very hard for many people to understand this, because a lot of people in our society today are saying, no, not necessarily. This is a choice. That this is a relative thing. It depends on the person. The person can choose whether or not they're male or female. And like we can't. There are definitely some people that there are issues that are there that we can't deny. But we know that absolutely that there is an absolute truth here that God created man according to what we believe, that God created man that male or female, and this is an absolute truth. All right, let us move on to the next one. So I'm not trying to explain all these things out individually. George Washington was the first president of the United States of America. This is an absolute truth. It is. It's a fact. It's not that, oh, well, no, actually, I think it was probably John Adams because he was really, no, it wasn't. If you look at history, history tells you that there is an absolute fact that George Washington was the first president of the United States. That's true. You can't deny that. I mean, you can, but it doesn't make sense. Marriage is between a man and a woman. Okay, good. So we have some disagreement here. That's fine. Most of you said it was an absolute truth. Some of you said it was a relative truth. But according to the way that we believe, according to our teachings, according to what the laws that God has put down, marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, yes, some people will say, no, no, well, no, no, you can, it depends on the person. The person can decide whether or not they want to be married, male, male, female, female. No, because if we're arguing, if we're saying that there are some things that are absolutely true for everyone, then that means that, and if we're, especially for us as Christians, as Catholics, if we're basing that off of our faith, then this would be one of those things that we have to say, maybe not. Maybe this doesn't fit that thing. So maybe we have to say, you know what? No, this is an absolute truth. All right, next one. Sex is to be reserved for marriage only. Now, many of you said that this is absolute truth. Some of you said that is relative truth. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your honesty. This is an absolute truth. According to what we have learned, according to our teachings, according to the traditions that the church has passed down, this is an absolute truth for the good of humanity, for the good of a person. This is an absolute truth that for everyone, for all people, that sex is something that should be reserved for marriage. And there are reasons for why. We don't have time to go into all the reasons and stuff. Chicago deep dish pizza is the best pizza in the world. Absolute truth? I wish. No, not necessarily. Relative truth? Yeah, this is very relative. It depends on the person. If you ask Kevin Etchen would say probably New York style pizza. Melvin Etchen, you would probably say, I don't. Do they have pizza?
No, I think I was the one who said it was actually pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Good. Melvin Etchen would agree. They would agree that Chicago deep dish is an absolute. Remember, we're not talking about do you agree with it or not. We're not talking about whether you agree with that absolute that deep dish pizza is the greatest. We're talking about whether is this an absolute truth for everybody, or is it a relative truth? It depends on the person. Okay, let's keep going. Pornography is a sin. All of you said that this is an absolute truth. This is. Our church teaches us this. And we'll talk about all this in connection. The greatest movie ever is Avengers Endgame. Again, that's a relative truth, very relative to the person. Abortion is wrong, an absolute truth, an issue that deals with life. Okay, and that's that. So let me go back to my other thing. What we have now, sorry, oopsie, there we go. The problem that we have here, and thank you very much for being honest with your responses in the survey, because this highlights for us what the issue really is in our society. Our society outside is telling us that everything is relative. There is no absolute truth. So everything is very dependent on the person. Well, so if it's absolutely true that everything is dependent on the person, isn't that an absolute truth? So already there's a lot of confusion with that. But as we can tell, there are a lot of issues that are here. There is a lot of consequences that happen with these things. You know, it's not like all this stuff happens just for the heck of it. And so a lot of this, and there's a reason why I used the WALL-E picture. This is very similar to the whole WALL-E example. If you remember from the movie WALL-E, how many of you guys have seen the movie WALL-E? I love that movie. It's a kid's movie, fine, but it has some pretty serious messages that it is trying to put out there. One key message that is out there is that there is a system that is trying to deceive you. See this plant, and I hopefully all of you saw the movie. I really don't want to ruin it for you. So if you didn't watch the movie and you do want to watch it, close your ears. But this plant, of course, the premise of the movie is that the planet Earth is a wasteland because people ate too much, consumed too much, and polluted too much. It's just gone. So humanity left on ships and they went off into outer space, and they're basically living on this big giant ship. And ideally, of course, robots were left behind like WALL-E, that were supposed to go around, clean up and stuff like that and keep things moving. Unfortunately, Wally's the only one that's there. But every now and then there are other robots like Evie, who is sent back to go and check to see if there's any sign of life. If there's any sign of life, then they will send a message, and then basically that is a sign for humanity that is on these spaceships to come back. Well, Evie finds a plant. She finds a sign of life. And she goes and she is automatically, she's put into a protocol. She shuts down. She's locked up. They take her onto the ship, and then they send it to the captain, and there's no plant. Because what happens is that the truth ends up being hidden, because there is an underlying agenda that's taking place. It's trying to keep the wool over everyone's eyes. That's very, very similar to what's happening today. It's scary how similar it is. And many people, in our survey, of course, there was a lot of confusion. Well, what about gay people? Why can't they get married? Or what's the whole deal with sex? And like, why can't, isn't that dependent on the person? Can't they choose for themselves? Or even abortion? Like, what the heck? Like, let people decide for themselves. I can't dictate to another person whether or not they can do these things or not. It's interesting how we are very quick to put ourselves in that position, but yet it's very easy for us to accept that the world is putting their opinion on us. And you might ask, well, why does the Catholic Church think like this? And why do we have to be like this? Well, the main reason why is because God has given us this moral law. And this moral law is God's way of showing us how much he loves us. So those of you who are on Instagram, you've probably seen my wife's stories and things like that. And you've seen our kids, and you've seen how crazy they are, and you've seen some of the ridiculous things that they have done and stuff like that. So imagine, and my littlest one is right now, she's 18 months. There you go. She's 18 months, and she's learning how to walk, and she's walking around, and she's doing all these things. Now imagine if she takes, say, some sort of a toy or something like that that has a sharp edge, or not a sharp edge, she like a butter knife. Imagine she's walking around with a butter knife, and she sees the outlet. She's like, oh, outlet. And she wants to go and she wants to shove this. She sees me plugging in things into the outlet. She wants to take this butter knife and shove it in there. Should I let her? Most of us would say no. Me as a parent, and I'm sure as many of you have probably experienced with your parents, or if you have little brothers and sisters, you've seen your parents do that, or maybe even you have done that to your little brothers and sisters, your cousins and things like that. When you see them doing something that they shouldn't do, you go and you take the thing out of their hand, or you explain to them, no, don't do that. Me explaining to an 18-month-old isn't going to really do anything, so I got to take it out of her hand. Well, she's going to sit there and wail and cry and pretend, and especially if it's Mary, she's going to pretend like I killed her or something like that. She's just going to start making all this noise. And for her, she's probably like, oh, you're so horrible. You're such a terrible person. You took away my freedom. Am I taking away her freedom? Or am I doing something because I love her? Because I know it's not good for her. I know that if she takes that butter knife and she goes in, it's going to hurt. So I'm protecting her from that. If we look at God's moral law in all that in all that he has given us, this is the key message that God is trying to tell us. Whether we look at sex, if sex isn't reserved for marriage, then, there are tremendous numbers of people that end up falling into severe depression because of this. For other people who just continue to go like this, there's all sorts of, other diseases and stuff like that. But then do you ever start seeing how people now are becoming objects for a purpose? That's the scary part of this. That's what's happening with all this. And we can look at everything. Abortion. If you look at abortion, the mental trauma that takes place to a person, which is the physical trauma that takes place, but then also the mental trauma that takes place to a person that has an abortion. That is very real. But society doesn't say anything about that. They don't talk about that. They don't say, oh, yeah, well, these are some of the things that happen. They push that aside and they start talking about women's rights. Whereas God is saying, no, this is life. It's to be protected. And I don't want you to do this because I know what it's going to cause you. I know where it's going to lead you, and it's not anywhere good. That's why we need to know that there are absolute truths in the world. Because these absolute truths, especially when we start going with them, understanding them, and making them a part of our lives, these lead us to true freedom. Now, freedom, of course, when I say what is freedom, some of you guys, especially you high schoolers, are probably like, oh, freedom is going to happen when I go to college. I can do whatever I want. And that's exactly what the world is telling us. The world, if you look at the definition on the bottom, the world is saying, do whatever you want. Don't let anyone control you or anything control you whatsoever. But the Catholic understanding is very different than that. The Catholic understanding of freedom is to be able to, the art of living life well, or to be able to do something well. Giving, this is freedom, giving the best of myself to the world. Or also mentioned, the ability to desire and to choose the good, not the bad. This is what the church teaches is freedom. Let me give you an example. Justin, of course, his grandparents, of course, he's very close to his grandparents. Grandfather no longer is here, but grandmother is here. Justin, are you able to speak Malayalam with your grandmother? Excuse me.
Really broken my arm, but yes.
Okay. Now, Justin, would you feel comfortable enough? Would you have the freedom to go up on, if you had to make an announcement at Palli after the 9:30 Qurbana, to speak in Malayalam to the entire congregation?
No.
No, probably not. Melvin Etchin probably could. Maybe he's kind of borderline, like, I don't know if I'm fully free to do that yet. I think Melvin Etchin can. But maybe he can, maybe he can't. Some of us are probably like, no. Dina, okay, Dina's got it. She's gonna definitely go up there. She's gonna rock that Malayalam and all that stuff. Anita, oh my gosh, yes, definitely. She's gonna totally go up there and say it. Me, I can speak. I don't know if I would be able to have the freedom to be able to do it well enough for that stage, for the altar in this case, or for that announcement. That's what freedom is, the art of being able to do something well. If we look at life, the art of being able to live life well. Well, how do you live life? You give of yourself to the world. Or another way of living life is you're not only doing what is right, but you're also desiring it too. You are free from temptation, free from sin. This, of course, if you look at it, that's a pretty high way of looking at things. That's that's pretty legit. What's our world saying? Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. I remember Jada Pinkett Smith, who is the wife of Will Smith. She was telling her daughter, I don't remember what her name is, Willow, I think. I don't know what her name is. But she was saying this on an interview or something like that, yeah, I teach my daughter, don't let no man tell you what to do with your body. And I'm like, wow, that's, not to say that, okay, a man should decide for, like, okay, no, this is what I want you to do. Not so much as that, but imagine, like, that's the whole idea. That's the whole premise of everything that's happening. Like, don't tell anybody what to do with your body, or you don't let anybody tell you what to do. I know as a teacher, oh my goodness, when I go up to a student and I say, hey, can you put your cell phone away? Because you're using it in class while I'm teaching. Like, who are you to tell me what to do? Oh my gosh, no. But isn't this exactly how sin came into the world? When Eve was standing there at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, what was it that the serpent was telling her? If you eat this, you will be like God. God told you not to eat from this tree. But he did that because he didn't want you to be like him. Don't make him tell you what to do. Go and eat that. That's how sin came into the world. And if you look at it, all of these things that we've been talking about, there's so many other things that are there. None of it has actually brought about much good into the world. Are we really free? Understanding and knowing what absolute truth is. Knowing that moral relativism is there. And realizing that it's not just something for us. So one of the things with moral relativism that we look at is, okay, yeah, I like, for many of us, maybe we went to the pro-life rally or this and that. Yeah, for abortion is wrong for me, but everybody else, they can kind of do it if they want to. I mean, no offense to Biden, I think Biden is a great man as a gentleman. Like, I think he's a great man. Hopefully, he's a great president. But Joe Biden, Catholic, he also comes out and says, for him personally, he's like, abortion is wrong for me. But he's not doing anything to stop it. If you want to say his party is very much in support of it, fine. I'm not arguing with that. Be that as it may. You could also say on the other side that Trump and Republicans go on the other extreme, which makes no sense. But this is what's wrong with our society, that there is this idea that all of this only applies to me, or it doesn't apply to me at all. But the beauty of all of this is that and I thank all of you for having these questions and stuff like that, because there are a lot of questions that we have. But the beauty of this is to know that there is absolute truth, that there is something that flies in the face of moral relativism, that no, we can't all just choose what we want, what we think is good. But there are some actual truths that are there. Now, if you don't agree with it, that's okay. It might not even necessarily be your fault. In many times it's not your fault. You're bombarded with all of the stuff around you that is telling you otherwise. So in that sense, it's okay. It's not your fault. But just because it's not your fault that you have this view in your mind doesn't let you off the hook. You now have a responsibility to learn about what your faith is teaching you. What is the moral law that's put out by Christ, through the Word of God, through the magisterium of the church? And why is that true? Without that last part, I mean, you can argue, you can stand against it, and you have the freedom of your opinion to do so. But if you don't ever try to figure out why, that's not helping you to move forward with anything. Those people who question are the ones who end up getting answers. If you ask a question but you never bother looking for the answer, then you're no better off. So in this whole topic, of course, with moral relativism, I just want to let you know, and hopefully this is very bare bones kind of approach to this, but hopefully you get a basic understanding, a very basic understanding as to what moral relativism is. Moral relativism is this idea that in society, everyone chooses for themselves what they believe to be true. That means that there is nothing that is true for everybody. So if you don't think abortion is right, but you think abortion is fine, that's okay. If you think gay marriage is right, but you don't think but you think it's wrong, it's all dependent on the person. And as Pope Benedict said, this is one of the greatest evils that is fighting against the church. If we want to look at it in another way, it is definitely a big attack on all of us, not us, I can't say that anymore, but on all of you young people, especially in the schools that you're going to, in the media that you're involved in, or not involved in the media that you are, bringing into yourselves, because that's just the way it is. Social media and everything is telling you a thing, but know that it's not. and you have to get stronger, and you have to know how to stand against it.